President Truman announced the official surrender.
This is a solemn but glorious hour. I wish that Franklin D. Roosevelt had lived to see this day. General Eisenhower informs me that the forces of Germany have surrendered to the United Nations. The flags of freedom fly all over Europe. For this victory, we join in offering our thanks to the Providence which has guided and sustained us through the dark days of adversity and into light. Much remains to be done. The victory won in the West must now be won in the East. The whole world must be cleansed of the evil from which half the world has been freed. United, the peace-loving nations have demonstrated in the West that their arms are stronger by far than the might of dictators or the tyranny of military cliques that once called us soft and weak. The power of our peoples to defend themselves against all enemies will be proved in the Pacific War as it was proved in Europe.
Prior to the baby boom, there is a period of approximately 20 years in which having children would have been difficult due to the Great Depression and World War II. The Great Depression and World War II caused economic and social hardships. This led to money loss, which caused families to be conservatively smaller prior to 1943. Families were small during the Great Depression because they could not afford to feed many children, yet alone themselves. During World War II, men went off to the war while women stayed home to work in wartime industries. World War II began in 1939, causing young men to leave home to fight for the United States, leading to a drop in reproduction. In 1945, World War II ended, bringing home thousands of men back to their families. Women left their positions in wartime industries to go back to the home and continue in traditional and social gender roles. In the 1950s, a woman's role in society was very little. Women were expected to cook, clean, take care of the children, all while looking pretty. A woman's views and opinions were viewed as less than that of a man's. Women were expected to be perfect in every which way. Men expected their wives and family to resemble that of a 1950s television family, such as the one seen on The Brady Bunch and Leave It to Beaver. Women were to have dinner prepared when a man returned home from work, have the children ready and situated, and limit the noise which may upset their husbands, all while making them feel comfortable. Since a woman's voice was not well respected in the 1950s, what a man said goes. No means no had no real meaning then, being that if a man wanted to have sexual intercourse with his wife, as his wife, it was your duty to pleasure her. These social norms helped lead to the increase in reproduction, causing the baby boom, because of those men returning home from the war who had been without their wives, girlfriends, or any female companionship for numerous years.
When I met you, woman, I couldn't help but notice a face so beautiful. Now imagine the faces you would make if we ever made love. Love and happiness. Yeah. Something that can make you do wrong, make you do right.
The baby boom consisted of the generation of children fathered by veterans returning to civilian life at the end of World War II. In 1957, a baby was born every 7 seconds. 2.3 million marriages were performed in 1946. 3.8 million babies were born in 1947. Over the span of this baby boom generation, approximately 79 million babies were born. Between 1948 and 1953, more babies were born than had been born over the previous 30 years. High birth rates and low death rates kept the population at record highs. The baby boom reflected the sudden removal of economic and social pressures which kept people from starting families.
Happiness is when take your time on me. My mind's telling me no, but my body's telling me yes. Baby, I don't wanna hurt nobody, but there is something that I must confess.
While abstinence, celibacy, and restraint were the social norms during the war, after the war, couples reunited and returned to traditional gender roles. The reproduction resumed and families began to grow. Babies were delivered every 8 seconds for the next 2 decades. Between 1943 and 1964, approximately 79 million babies were born. This generation is called the baby boomers. These births resulted in a 40% increase compared to the 7% increase of the 1930s.
I know just what you want, and I know just what you need, girl.
On June 22, 1944, Congress passed the GI Bill of Rights. This allowed VA loans for homes and farms at a low interest rate and made higher education for veterans possible. Having this education, many returning veterans went back to school to get a better education. It also made many young people want to start families. With so many of them getting married, starting families, and buying their first home, this caused the American second class to evolve. Many suburban wives were pregnant at the same time, and in time, new schools had to be built, and some places became legal communities. The Highway Act of 1956 contributed to the suburban growth. It expanded the highway systems, allowing residents to commute to jobs within the city. Being able to work within the city allowed for former veterans to earn more monies which would support their new families and the growing population, making it easier for them to get jobs. It was also cause of the baby boom. Effects of the baby boom. As the economy boosted, higher demands were required, such as consumer goods, thus creating a new market. Hula hoop slinkings, music, and fashion changed. A new generation became rebels who wanted to change from their parents' generations. Automobiles and baby supplies also came into demand. Long-term impacts were education, construction, careers, a shift in population, geography, and a move to the suburbs. Long-term impacts that still affect us today are an increase in life expectancy, Social Security, housing, healthcare, and new consumer goods.